All right, ladies and gentlemen, my dear student. Right. Remember what we are doing supervision, right? Supervision. Can you still remember where we stopped last time? Then we're going to continue from here to manage project operations. Hello, listen, listen. Don't disturb. I said, believe. Yeah. So, when you are a project manager, right, you got that responsibility to manage the operations of a project. Younger. Manage the operations, right? You got that responsibility to make sure that you deliver your project as at when due. You stick to deadlines. You must make sure that you don't waste resources, right? You must make sure that you are cost conscious. You stick to budget. Manage within the parameters or the confinement of the budget scope. You must make sure that you stick to the scope, right? In doing that, these are the aspects that you need to focus on. The use of resources. The use of resources, right? We've got different types of resources. We've got physical resources. For example, physical resources are things that you can see, you can touch, you can feel. You know what I'm talking about, right? For example, in the project environment, you got equipment, right? Equipment can be classified as a physical resource. Hello, I see you are distracted. Hello, who is this? Younger? Younger? Twins. You must focus. What are you writing? I'm explaining something important here. Please focus. You are doing your task. Okay, but make sure that you don't distract. You don't supposed to be doing your task when I'm teaching. But make sure you watch the video, right? You watch the video. Right. So you must make sure that you manage your resources. Right. So when somebody asks you perhaps to identify the types of resources that are needed in a project environment, you can talk about physical resources, right? It depends on the context, the project contextual environment, or the context of the project, if you will. For example, if it's a project of your NCV that we are always fond of using as an example, right? You got your laptop, you got your books or whatever, you got whatever that is physical resources, something that you can see, feel, and touch that you are using to run your project, right? Laptop, perhaps, as the case may be, equipment, and all those type of stuff, materials. Yeah. Then you got financial resources, which is the capital resources. We are talking about money. What do you call money in Afrikaans? Huh? Is my pronunciation correct? Yeah, money, right? It's part of the resource required for you to do your project. So information is a resource as well, right? Because when you've got information, it makes you to be confident, right? When you got information, you get well informed. Do you understand what I mean? As well as human resources. In this case, you can as well, in most cases these days, they call it a human capital. So these are the resources that you need to manage in a project. Do you understand what I mean? For example, if you don't manage the physical resources very well, it might not be available, right? If you don't maintain your physical resources, it can go bad, and it can create a kind of a stoppage or disturbance in your project, most especially if the resources are not in good condition. You know what I'm talking about. Financial resources, you need to make sure that you do what we call cost control, right? Cost planning and cost control. Make sure that you don't expend more than what is required. Information as well. Then human resources in terms of the team members working on the project. You must make sure that you have the required number of team or number of team members working in the project. Because, for example, in a situation where you need to employ 5 people, right, and you end up employing 3 people, that means it's enough. inadequate, it's not enough. So what is going to happen in most cases to the three people? You're going to be overloading them with work. And it might get to a point that where they're going to be demotivated, demoralized. Do you understand? And such demoralization can affect negatively their productivity, their respective or combined productivity. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Then you need to measure the performance, right? You need to manage as well, not measure. Manage the performance of activities. For example, is the work being done according to defined time frame? You got a time frame. Every project have got a time frame. True of us. Right. So if the project are not being done according to the specified time, you might end up, right, running late or at the end of the day not be able to hand over the project asset when required. And that could attract some financial implications, right? Of which you need to employ extra resources, right? If it is government project, like I know, if you don't deliver at a specified day, sometimes such project could have a penalty clause, right? For example, they say each day that you don't deliver or each day beyond the delivery date, you can say perhaps 500 rand a day. Yeah? So if you delay your project beyond the delivery date, let's say 10 days after, then 500 rand times 10 is a lot of money. You know? So you should always strive to avoid such penalty, right? Such a cost implication. Then you need to look at the problems as well, because problems, as we do know, are inevitable. I'll focus. Problems are inevitable, right? Problems are what? Inevitable. What do we mean by inevitability? What do we mean by that? Who can explain to me? Zita, can you explain what we mean by this term? Inevitable. Problems are inevitable, right? Inevitable. This the battery, something that is unavoidable, right? For example, in this, let's use your NCV as a case study, as a case study of a specific project. You know, most often we do problems do come up, but the problem, the not the problem. The most important is what you need to consider is how well you are able to resolve the problem. Right. So we say problems are inevitable, of course. A problem is a discrepancy between what is planned and what is being delivered. Right. Between what is planned and what is being delivered, which we can call a kind of, we can call it a variation, or rather, or you can call it variation from scope. Then you can as well call it a problem as such, right? Then one needs to look at the problem and see how it can be addressed, right? Okay. Then actions to take or action to correct problem should be right. What we are trying to say is this: when you've got a situation where there are discrepancies between what was planned and what is being done, which is a problem, of course, right? That needs to be addressed. Do you understand what I mean? There is a term that we use to describe that. The difference between what was planned and what was or what is being done. We call it what? Deviation. 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 You deviated from scope. Right. What you set out to do is now different from, or what you've done is different from what you set out to do. Right. There's a kind of a deviation. So whenever you have such kind of deviation, you need to inject in corrective measures. A corrective measure needs to be injected in. In other words, actions needs to be taken to correct the problem. And such actions need to be appropriate. The action must address the problem. Right. If there's a problem that you need to address, right, whatever that you formulated to address the problem must be appropriate. Being able to address the problem, right? Then it must be quick so that you address the problem instantaneously if possible. Then it must be cost effective, right? So those are the things that you need to consider. Then project cost monitoring. You need to measure, you need to monitor. Remember what we are doing. We are talking about managing project operations, right? You need to be able to as well uh, monitor, right, the project cost. How do you do that? You analyze, right? You record, then you measure. You measure, I mean, taking the data. Then you analyze the data, then you record what have been uh, the data or whatever findings that you've come up with. Then that will inform you in terms of how the direction of how the course is going, right? Like I said, you need to make sure that the project, your expenses in the project doesn't exceed the budgeted amount. Remember, a project have got a budget, right? During the execution of the project, you must make sure that whatever expenses that are being made are aligned. You must control it, right? There might be some situation where you discover that some items are getting more expensive or outrunning the whatever budget that has been allocated to such a task. So what you do is you must make sure, for example, if task A 5,000 was allocated, right? Then you've discovered that at the end of the execution, you've expended more than 5,000. Then you look at task B, you need to look for where you can be able to make savings to cover up for the ones that you've exceeded the allocation. Does it make sense to you? Right. You can do that. Then you need to monitor progress as well, right? You need to control progress, right? You create a kind of a status report. You need to be able to conduct team status review in terms of uh, what, for example, you set out what needs to be done, right? Remember in your schedule, you say week one, for example, this is what needs to be done, right? You must go at the end, by the time the work is executed or during the execution of the project, you can go back to look at your timeline to see in terms of what status, the status of job that have been done, so that you can be able to control the progress of the project. Look at what we are trying to say in Excel. You got a Gantt chart. A Gantt chart depicts what needs to be done at a specific period. Right. So during the execution of the project, you must use the Gantt chart to monitor the progress. For example, you say week one, week two, week three, week four. If a project, for example, is scheduled to take 1 month, which is 4 weeks. So by the end of 10 weeks, you're supposed to complete what? How many percentage? 75%. So if by the end of the third week you are still struggling to complete 50%, it tells you that there is a problem with the project. So you need to be able to create the status report, conduct team status review, right? Replan stage schedule, update cost, update schedule. So what we are trying to say is this. For example, you made a schedule in terms of the timeline, how long it's going to take you to execute the project. That schedule you've made is not cast on stone. You know what I mean by casting something on stone? What it means is that that schedule is something that is, it must be flexible, right? It must be flexible because during the execution of the project, you might end up and discover that the schedule might be too tight. So what you need to do is you need to adjust it. You need to make it flexible. That is why you say you need to review, right? Review your schedule accordance to or in conformity with reality, with what is happening during the execution of the project. So, in terms of the project monitoring tools, what are the tools that could be utilized? What are the tools that can be used to monitor projects? We call bar chart, right? Which is a project document. So you can use a bar chart, right? You can use a work plan, right? You can use a project specification, network schedule, progress report, budget, cash flow statement, and quality plan. This can be used for you to monitor the progress of the project. For example, how do you use a project document and report, right? Because there must be report from a project site that you can compare to the project document to see that what is being done on site is in accordance with what have been specified in the project document. What about the work plan, right? The work plan is like a schedule. You've known at a specific period of time what needs to be done, right? You specify it. At week 3, 75% of the job should be done. So during the execution now, then you must have to compare at week 3 if exactly the 75% have been done. So you can make use of a work plans or work schedule. Then project specification. How are you going to use project specification? Because the project specification will detail this out the scope of the project, right? Remember, you are not just doing a project just for doing the project, right? You must remember that the project deliverables, right, must be aligned, must be achieved. The objectives of the project must be achieved. So if at the end of the day that you are not sticking to the project objectives or to the project specification when executing the project on site, it means that the objectives of the project will likely to be jeopardized. Then the network schedule, what you understand what we mean by network schedule, which shows the relationship, right? The network schedule shows the relationship between the tasks. So that relationship was for you or to be able to know which task to be done, right? Which task to be done the same time, and it helps you to show the interdependency, right, of the task. So it can help you as well to monitor what is happening on site, whether the execution of the task on site in reality are being done as per what was detailed out in the network schedule. The progress report can help you as well. Then from the progress report, you can be able to know whether the project is progressing the way it should be. Then the budget, you can use the budget because the budget tells you exactly what needs to be spent on the project. So you need to make sure that whatever expenditure or expenses that you are dispensing during the um, execution of the project are as line with the budget. Then the cash flow statement, you know the cash flow statement, the movement of money, right? In and out. Right. So most especially where you have project whereby you have a kind of a stream of payment, right? To keep up with the cash flow, to keep the cash flow healthy. So you must make sure that the money that comes in is more than the ones that goes out. So you can use cash flow statement to monitor the project. You can use it as a project monitoring tool. And the quality plan, right? The quality plan stipulates the quality requirement of the project, right? We set out the what we call the benchmark, right? The benchmark on which you are going to use to measure standard, right? It sets out the standard requirement. So during the execution of the project, you have to make sure that whatever that is being done on site is in accordance with the quality standard requirement. So these are the project monitoring tools. In the exam, if they ask you to identify some of the project monitoring tools, then You are free to talk about others, right? So project reporting. Now we are going to unpack what we mean by project reporting, right? Project reporting is about collecting information about the project, right? Collecting information. The kind of information you need to collect in terms of project reporting is inclusive of good news and bad news, right? For example, if there are problems being experienced in the project, right, it needs to be reported so that one can look for an effective way of addressing the problem. So we say collect information about the project, right? Problem experience and the resolution put into the report and sent to the stakeholders. Right. For example, if you are making a project reporting to the stakeholder, so what you need to do is you need to collect the information, right? Information about the project or whatever problem that has been experienced. Then you can as well include the achievement, right? So such information needs to be collated, put together, and detailed out in the report to be sent to the stakeholders. So who are the stakeholders in this case? It depends on the circumstance. For example, the stakeholders could be even the team members, it could be the sponsors, it could be the beneficiary, as the case may be. So you need to collect information in terms of task completion information. So task completion information will ensure regular update on the project progress, right? Because when you are collecting information, it helps you as well to know about the progress of the project, right? And whatever variance that have been identified must be reported. You know, variance. Variance is the same thing as deviation, right? Variance from the planned work, right? The difference between, sorry, variance is the difference between the planned work and the actual work, right? For example, this is what you've set out to do. Now, you try to compare it with what has been done on site, the performance. Variance, in other words, can be explained in this form. You got a standard requirement, right? Which act as the benchmark. This is the standard requirement, the standard performance. So whatever is be done on site during the execution of the project, you compare it with the standard. So the difference between the standard and the performance is what we refer to as a variance. You know what is a variance? Yeah, it's the difference between standard performance and actual performance. Right. So that is what we call variance. And such needs to be reported. So to report the information, report on the status of the project, right, in terms of the progress, report on progress, what has been accomplished so far, and you can as well predict future status, right? When you are collecting information on the project, hello, when you are collecting information about the project, right, what you do is you go there, you look at what have been done, you collect factual information. Then, if there are problems that have been encountered, that needs to be reported as well. Then, you look at the actual performance and compare it with the planned performance, which is the standard, right? The actual performance and the plant performance. Then you look at where there are variances. So such variances needs to be reported. Then that will help you to be able to report in terms of the progress that has been achieved. From there, you can be able to focus on the future status. So predict future status and status against the project plan as well as expected time to complete. So by so doing, you can be able to predict when the project or the future time that the project will be completed, right? So you can only be able to achieve this if you got actual factual information, data from the project. You are able to collect data, progress data, performance data, right? from the project side. Then you need, how do you measure project progress? Measuring actual progress, again, we've already talked this, and this are kind of a repetition. When you measure actual progress against the project plan or indicator, then you are able to detect the variance, if there are variance, right? When there are variances, what do you do? Do you just leave it, keep quiet? No, you need to look for a way to correct it, right? So during project measuring, what happens? You collect data about intended achievement. What do we mean by intended achievement? Intended achievement is based on your project plan, right? Your intended achievement is based on your project plan. That is what you set out to achieve or what you decided on when you were preparing your project plan. So such data are collected. Data is collected about the intended achievement. Then you compare it to the actual work that is done on site. There you can have the variance. You compare the two, right? What you plan to achieve. Hello, focus, focus, focus. What you plan to achieve. Hello, don't disturb. What you plan to achieve is you can, that one is regarded as intended achievement. Then the actual achievement is what have been done on site. Then you compare, right, whether there are variances or deviations. So when there are deviations, so what do you do? Then you look for corrective measures, right? Then problems and opportunity identified, as we said, when there are variances, then correct measures is taken. Then these are the measuring tools. Guys, these are the specific measuring tools. These are very important. For example, finance of the project. What do you use? The budget and budget control chart. You use that to control the finances of the project, right? Then project timeline, right? You use project timeline, which could be, of course, a Gantt chart and schedules, which details out the deadlines. Then project activities, you use progress activity schedule and event control chart. Then evaluate the project progress, right? You evaluate progress, evaluate project in terms of its success or its purpose. How do you evaluate the project progress? Part of the things, one of the things that needs to be done as well, or one of the things that you need to concern yourself with as well, is the success of the project in terms of being able to achieve its purpose, right? You need to determine the cause of encountered problem during the project rollout and document lessons learned. This is what you do when you are doing evaluating the progress of a project. Or you can as well do this when you are evaluating a project holistically. You need to determine how well the project is able to achieve its purpose and the lessons, what problems that you've encountered during the execution of the project, and what lessons you've learned. Right. Good lessons needs to be kept and be replicated, and wherever that you were not able to perform well as desired, then it will form as a lesson learned that next time you need to improve on those areas as a kind of a continuous improvement. So, while evaluating the progress, you project are evaluated against. Remember, you got objectives. You got the objectives of a project. Guys, listen. How will you know that a project is successful? Right? A project is said to be successful if such project is able to achieve its purpose. Right? If the objectives of the project are being achieved. The project are evaluated against, or in evaluating the project now, you need to take consideration of the objectives of the project, right? Whereas in many projects, you got what we call verifiable indicators. Indicators that you can utilize for you to be able to know whether that project is being successful. Right.
To inform you that we provide level 2.
Okay.
So they are going to be classified.
Okay. Good. 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 Yeah. So you need to have certain verifiable indicators, things that you are going to see in the project that can inform you that the project is being successful, right? Then, when you are evaluating a project now, you need to evaluate such project, for example, in terms of you evaluate it against the objective of the project, right? Then you need to preoccupy yourself with this by asking yourself or asking certain questions pertaining to the achievement of the project objectives. Right. Are the project objectives achieved, or were the project objectives achieved? The purpose of the project, what the project set out to achieve. Have we achieved those objectives? Then that is what you need to concern yourself with here when you are evaluating the project. Right. Then the verifiable, we call these verifiable indicators. Are those indicators, right? Based on the specificity of the indicators, are they achieved or are they complied with, right? Because, like I said, the verifiable indicators, these are the indicators that have been set out, mapped out in your project during the planning stage of your project. That once these are the signs that one can be able to know whether the project or is successful or not. Then the time, you look at the time frame, right? The deadline. For example, a project was specified to take 1 month, right? Now you have to look back to see if the project is actually taking 1 month or have actually taken 1 month. Then in terms of the quality, you look at the specification, you look at the scope, right? You look at the standard requirement, right? And from here, you can be able to evaluate the performance, what have been done against the standard requirement for you to be able to make an informed decision as to whether the project is being successful. Then the resources as well. You look at the resources, right? In terms of the usage of resources, right? You look at the resources that were used, whether there were wastages or whatever. So if there were no wastages or no waste, as you may call it, so you can as well from here be able to make an informed decision as to whether the project was successful. So these are what you need, the parameters that needs to be utilized in evaluating the success of a project. Right. The principles of project evaluation. When you are evaluating a project, right, evaluating a specific project is not supposed to be a punitive exercise, as most people take it to be. So these are the principles that you need to adhere to when you are evaluating the project. So these principles needs to be put into consideration for you to be able to perform a credible and a fair evaluation of a project. This thing is very important. You need to be impartial and independent. So when you want to evaluate a project, right, someone that is evaluating a project must not be someone that have done the project, because you cannot evaluate yourself, right? Of course, there might be or there could be some internal evaluation, but external evaluation of a project must be done by an outsider, somebody that can be impartial and independent, somebody that can be regarded as being impartial and independent, right? So that that person can be able to provide a credible report. Then credibility, right, is one of the principles that we need to abide with or we need to respect in terms of the project evaluation. So here we are talking in terms of transparent process, and the evaluation should be evaluator with experience, right? Then usefulness. So be useful to everyone and stakeholder. So whatever outcome of the evaluation outcomes on this level must be useful to everyone and the stakeholder. And when you are evaluating a project, one of the principles is that it must involve all stakeholders. This aspect is very, very important. Guys, listen. This one, it comes out every time in the exam. Take note. Principles of project evaluation. One, be impartial and independent, right? So in most cases, or it is recommended that you use an external stakeholder. Then it must be credible, it must be useful, in terms of the outcome, be useful to everyone and the stakeholders. And when you are evaluating, for you to be able to produce a credible report, right? A credible evaluation report, you must involve all stakeholders, right? So when evaluation should be done, guys, this one is very important. It comes out in the exam as well, right? During the implementation of the project, right? Then what type of evaluation is being done during the implementation of the project? So you can do it during the implementation to make sure that the progress of the project is in order, is adhered to as per as the schedule, right? Then you can do it during the implementation of the project. Then you can do it few months after the completion of the project. Then you can as well do it, yeah, few months after the completion of the project is what we call a postmortem, right? So during the implementation of the project, at at the project, and a few months after completion, this focus. So the one that the evaluation that needs to be done few months after the completion focuses on impact, right? So what is the purpose of evaluation, right? The purpose of evaluation is for you to ascertain whether the project objectives have been achieved, right? And not only on good aspect of it, you can still look at where there were challenges, right? And how those challenges could be improved upon or could be overcome. For example, how could you improve on what you were doing or you are doing? And have you done what you were supposed to do? These are the rhetoric questions that you need to preoccupy yourself with when you are doing a project evaluation. Right. Then what must be evaluated? Like we said before, the project schedules, the Gantt chart must be evaluated, right? Then you need to evaluate the budget as well, the processes that were used to execute the project, processes and procedures needs to be as needs to be evaluated. Then you need to make sure that you evaluate. Is the period over? Okay. All right. So we're gonna stop there. All right. This topic is very long, right? Bye, Yala.